All right, the last thing we're going to talk about in this section is file permissions. This is one of those areas that a lot of people find confusing or complicated. It's actually very easy. Let me make it super simple for you. So I've logged in as root and I'm in my home directory. Let's go to the home directory. And in this directory, I want to create a file called deploy.sh. Files with this extension are called shell scripts. In these files, we can write any of the Linux commands you have learned so far. So we can combine all these commands and create a deployment script. Okay? So to write to this file, I'm going to use the echo command. I'm going to write echo hello to deploy.sh. So I'm writing this line to this file. Let's go ahead. And now let's verify it. So we have echo hello. So when we execute this file, we're going to see hello on the terminal. Okay. Now to see the permissions for this file, we have to get a long listing. Take a look. So in this directory, we have 3 directories, Bob, John, and Mosh, and 1 file. Now in the first column, we can see the permissions for each item. Now look at the first letter. If the first letter is D, that means this is a directory. If it's a hyphen, that means this is a file. Pretty straightforward. Now, what about the other letters? Well, these letters, they're actually 9 letters divided into 3 groups. Here's the first group, then we have the second group and the third group. In each group, we have read, write, and execute permissions. So for this item, for deploy.sh, for this file, we only have read and write permissions, but the execute permission is missing because we have a hyphen. Now, in contrast, look at the permissions for this directory. We have read, write, and execute. Execute is used so we can go into that directory. So we can use the cd command with it. So by default, all directories have the execute permission. Now, in the second group, we only have the read permission. And this is true for the third group. But what are these groups for? Well, the first group represents the permissions for the user who owns this file. That is the root user here. The second group represents the permissions for the group that owns this file. And that is this group. So by default, every user that is created is automatically placed inside a group with the same name. Okay? Now, the third group represents permissions for everyone else. Now, to execute this file, you have to type period, referring to the current directory, then / deploy.sh. We get a permission error because even I, as the root user, do not have the execute permission on this file. This is where we use the change mode command. So we type chmod. Then here we can change the permissions for the user that owns the file, or the group, or others. For the user, I'm going to add the execute permission. If I want to remove the execute permission, I would have to use a hyphen. Okay. So we want to add the execute permission to where? To deploy.sh. Now, let's get the long listing one more time. Look at the color of this file. It turned green because now it's executable. Now look at the first group. We have read, write, and execute. So I can call deploy.sh and we see hello on the terminal. Beautiful. Now, with this setup, the root user is the only user who can execute this file. So if we go to this other window where I've logged in as John, we're currently in John's home directory. So let's go 1 level up. Now we are inside the home directory of all users. And over here, we have the deployment script. But if we try to execute this file, we get a permission error. So how do we enable John to execute this file? Well, back to our first window. We're going to use chmod one more time. This time, we're going to apply the permission for others. We want to enable the execute permission to deploy.sh. Good. Now, back to John's window. We can call deploy.sh and we see hello on the terminal. Beautiful. So this is how we can change permissions for files. Now, let's talk about variations of this command. So we can also combine groups. So we can say OG, that means others, and the group that owns this file. It's not short for original gangster. So for others and the group owner, we can add the execute permission. We can also add the write permission, and we can remove the read permission. So this is the syntax to use this command. And of course, we don't have to type a single file name. We can type multiple file names or use patterns. For example, we can apply these permissions to any files with the shell extension. So we're done with this section. I hope you've learned a lot. With the foundation that you have built in this section, now you're ready to learn Docker the right way. So I will see you in the next section.